Quality of life, technology. These pennies are here to help illustrate how a piece of technology in your pocket today is going to improve your quality of life. Can I see a show of hands of how many people have a cell phone with them today? That's what I thought. Big changes and little changes are coming. And these pennies and your cell phone are about to surprise and delight you in ways you can't begin to imagine. With as much privacy as you want, they're going to improve your quality of life and help you have better experiences. Let's start there. When you hear the term quality of life, you may picture a sandy beach. I decided to look up a conventional definition, and Wikipedia tells us there are 6 standard indicators or patterns that are used to define and measure quality of life: wealth and employment, the built environment, physical and mental health, education, recreation and leisure, and social belonging. 2 words are not on that list: technology and experience. Experience is an in-the-moment thing, whereas quality of life seems to be more measured across a period of time and an aggregate of those 6 things. So you might think of quality of life as the climate you're living in at any given point in time, and the experiences you're having are more like the weather in that climate at that time. It may be obvious to you that technology would not be on this list. Today, we often think of technology as more like an addiction that's more in control of us than we are of it. We think of it as helping us become more efficient. Get that most recent email, sports score, use it for a driving application. But when you think about optimizing an already too busy life, it becomes more like becoming the best at too busy rather than actually improving our quality of life. So when it takes us 1 minute to do something that used to take us 10, and we get back those 9 minutes, do we use those 9 minutes for recreation and leisure time? Not usually. But technology is already starting to offer improvements to our quality of life through one fundamental change in the way we interact with it, what it can capture, how much it can capture, and the patterns that will emerge. Some of those patterns you'll choose to act on, some of them you'll ignore. Some of the patterns will reveal that you have a relationship with people that you don't know that you have relationships with today. That will be really exciting, and that'll take things in the opposite direction of some of those not-so-social faces that we see in coffee shops and airports looking down at their technology today. This is a wordle of this TED Talk. The bigger the word, the more frequently I'm saying it. See how big patterns and privacy are? Patterns have been around forever. Ray Kurzweil wrote a book called How to Create a Mind. And in it, he describes that the human brain has over 300 million pattern recognition circuits. 300 million is a lot. But all of those pattern recognition circuits missed a pattern in baseball for over 100 years. Moneyball is a book and a movie that describes how baseball for 100 years used batting average as the statistic that they use to pick and pay players. In 1977, a guy named Bill James uncovered a pattern. He realized a statistic called on-base percentage, which combines batting average and walks, is a more consistent indicator of whether a player will help a team win a baseball game. Even more amazing, it took 25 years before anybody would do anything about it. In 2002, Billy Beane, the manager of Oakland's baseball team, a team that at the time was famous for losing baseball games, had his back against the wall, had a tiny budget compared with the mighty New York Yankees, decided to apply this pattern using technology in the way he picked his baseball players. People thought he was bat crazy, but it worked. They won. They won a lot, and that really changed Billy Beane's quality of life. But it caused a lot of people to look in the mirror and wonder if they were missing a pattern, if they were using the right statistic to make the decisions that were important in their lives. I like to talk in threes. I just talked about quality of life, technology, and experiences. Now I'm going to talk about what was known, what is known, and what you will know about yourself in the future. A lot of information can be collected about us in a lot of different ways of categorizing it, and I like my friend Joe Weinman's way of categorizing information. He calls the ABCDEs. I've added F and G. A is for attitude, are we happy or grumpy? B is for our behaviors, what are we doing? C is for context, where are we doing it? D for demographics, age, gender, zip code kinds of information. E for environment, is it sunny or rainy? F I added for facts, biometric information like pulse and heart rate, and G for goal. Why do we choose to enter an experience? Is it the best price? Is it speed of service? Is it some product selection or something else? It wasn't that long ago that not that much was known about us. Many of us remember the Sunday newspapers we'd get and we'd throw it on the kitchen table and out would spill all the advertising inserts. A clear indication that the marketers who paid for those ads didn't know anything particularly special about us because everybody in the same city gets the same advertising inserts. That's partly because back in those days, it was hard to know much about us. There wasn't any internet data to collect. There wasn't much in the way of credit card information to collect and categorize us. But today it's different. Today we might be out on a website looking at a pair of shoes that we're thinking about buying and then hop over to a news site and up pops an ad for that exact same pair of shoes. It's a little creepy the first time it happens until you realize it doesn't really mean they've learned anything specific about us per se other than we might be interested in buying that pair of shoes. But how would you like to be the dad who was the last one to find out his teenage daughter was pregnant? Even Target knew. See, his daughter, as a teenager, was a member of their loyalty program, and one day she went into Target and she bought 4 things: hand sanitizer, dietary supplements, fragrance-free lotion, and a large volume of cotton balls. Those 4 things were enough for Target to pinpoint the pattern and be confident that she was pregnant. Not just that. Because of the large volume of cotton balls, they were able to pinpoint her due date, and that informed the timing of when they would send her advertisements. Sometimes we're looking for one pattern, a much more surprising and unexpected pattern emerges. That takes us to Viagra. Viagra is a drug that was designed for hypertension. And you may be aware that ads today for Viagra don't mention hypertension. That's because in clinical trials, when a drug is being tested, they're looking for 2 things. Does the drug do what it was designed to do? And if it emerges with some side effects that are bad, that will derail the drug trial. If they find a side effect that's surprising and unexpected that is even better than what the drug was originally designed to do, they sometimes will repurpose the drug, and that's what happened with Viagra in the drug trial that they used with 3,000 people, which is a typical size of a drug trial. Target had the 4 pieces of information. Drug trials have 3,000 pieces of information. Rogaine is another example of a drug trial that went the same way as Viagra, where Rogaine was intended to be for blood pressure. Today, Rogaine, as you may know, is marketed solely to combat baldness. When you go from 4 pieces of information to 3,000, that's a big jump, just as going from transaction information to experience information is also a big jump. Imagine what you could do if you had 30,000 pieces of information about one customer. That's what Disney does every day. I'm not talking about Disneyland, the 300-acre spot in California. I'm talking about Disney World, over 30,000 acres near Orlando. They had a customer satisfaction problem. People in the Orlando heat, in long lines, unable to make reservations for restaurants or attractions. And people were having bad experiences. And Disney didn't know who was having a bad experience. It's a little bit like the Sunday newspaper example I mentioned. They had no idea who was having the good experience and who was having a bad experience. But they solved the problem. They created an online portal that allowed people to pre-plan their experiences, including restaurants and attractions, usually 4 days or more. And then they shipped them something called a bracelet called a Magic Band. The Magic Band is worn by customers as they go through Disney World to enter the park and redeem their restaurant reservations and attraction reservations. The band also emits a signal about once a second. So Disney can see whether you're ahead or behind in your planned experiences. They can see if you're having a bad experiences and in the moment help you recover from that bad experience immediately. It's magical. Because it's Disney, of course, they've done all of the things to avoid being creepy about tracking people and help ensure the privacy of their information. But as they said, the band emits a signal about once a second. Over the course of an 8-hour day, that's 30,000 signals a day, 30,000 pieces of information they collect about location of their customer every day. That's a huge amount of information. Now, that might not sound like it has anything to do with you or your day-to-day experiences because most of us don't go to Disney World every day, thankfully. But a lot of us use something every day that tracks us in the same way, our driving applications. We enter our destination, that's our plan, and it tells us turn-by-turn directions for when we're going to get there, whether they're hidden police cars, accidents, and it reroutes us. I drive every day. I use my driving application every day. Not because I need turn-by-turn directions anymore, because I know where I'm going. I need to know what time I'm going to get there and if I'm going to be late. But every day, it gives me the exact same directions. I start to feel like Bill Murray in the movie Groundhog Day after a while, where every day is the exact same day over and over again. I'm surprised it doesn't learn my patterns, that I know how to get from my house to the highway. But every day, it tells me the same 8 turns that I have to take to get from my house to the highway. But I know that soon it will learn, and it will know my patterns and behaviors, and that will make it a lot more exciting and interesting for me. A lot of people also use fitness trackers these days. People tell me that they have to get their 10,000 steps. I have a lot of friends that say that those fitness trackers have changed their behaviors, that they'll do everything they can to get their 10,000 steps, and that some of them have even lost weight. But it's the same sort of groundhog story where it's not learning their patterns. They're not really learning anything new about themselves that's actionable or interesting. So that's what was known about us, what's known about us today. I'm going to talk a little bit more about privacy now, and then I'm going to talk about what's coming. So privacy is a huge issue, always has been, always will be. The good news is that we've already got some standards to protect our privacy. Those standards come about in the form of things like that driving application where we willingly accept to give up our location information, and in exchange, we expect to get something back. That's the deal that's struck. All of these applications that are asking us to give up some information about ourselves, whether it's location or context or demographics or whatever it is, we expect something in return. That's the big win for us, that the standard's already been established. That for us to accept giving something up, we expect something in return. So anything that comes after that will have to adhere to that standard. So as this information is being collected in large volumes, big companies, of course, are taking notice. A lot of companies now are hiring data scientists, which is a fancy name for statisticians. They're also hiring a lot of economists. The New York Times reported that as of September 2016, Amazon.com had 34 job openings for economists. 34 openings just for economists at Amazon.com. So I mentioned Disney has the 30,000 pieces of information, a bucket load of information, literally. I also mentioned the biometric information that we might be able to collect. Your heart beats 60 to 100 times a minute. Over the course of a day, that can be over 100,000 heartbeats a day. So then if you add other things like environment and demographic and context data, it can very quickly become 150,000 pieces of information about you every day. That's 5 of these buckets full of pennies every day. The good news is you control it. You're in charge. You decide how and when to use it. The patterns are going to emerge. Some of the patterns you can't see. Speaking of patterns you can't see, DNA revealed that roses are related to stinging nettles. Those are the kinds of patterns that are going to start to emerge where you're going to see not only a pattern about yourself, it's going to reveal that you have a relationship to somebody else that you never knew existed. The next pattern I want to talk about involves Microsoft, a little bit behind here. Microsoft makes operating software and operating system software. Sometimes that software crashes. When it crashes, it goes into error mode. And one day, Microsoft collected the error logs of all the computers on campus, and they noticed that the error logs had an error at the exact same time every day, which didn't make any sense to them because people are working on different things. Somebody decided to go into the world of environment information and notice that solar flares are something that affect the Earth. It hits the Earth's surface. Humans don't detect solar flares, but the silicon chip on a computer can feel it, and it's enough to cause the computer to go into error mode. They would never have figured out the cause of the pattern if they hadn't gone to environment information. Now, that particular pattern wasn't actionable by Microsoft. It wasn't particularly helpful, but those are the kinds of patterns that are going to emerge that we can see and decide if we're going to do something about or ignore. That's what's going to be so exciting about all of this information that we're going to be collecting about ourselves. All right. So I talked about Disney, I've talked about Microsoft, I've talked about roses and nettles, and the 150,000 pieces of information that we're going to be collecting about ourselves. So what? How's that going to affect us? What's going to change? What's going to blow our minds? Well, the first thing that's going to happen is things like driving applications are going to be smarter about making recommendations about our patterns. The obvious one is it'll notice that if we left work 15 minutes earlier every day last week, it would have shaved 40% off of our drive time or something like that. Then it will start to collect biometric information and notice that maybe our heart rate's elevated and we're stressed out, and it will suggest a lower stress route as an option. It might notice that it's going to rain or snow tomorrow and suggest that you work from home. That'll all be really helpful. The really wow stuff starts to come when you look at these 150,000 pieces of information every day and start to discover the nettles for your rows. You start to figure out something that's equivalent to the solar flare, some environmental thing that's a pattern for you, and you'll find out not only that you have that pattern, you'll be able to find out if somebody else shares that pattern. You'll share the information anonymously probably at first because you can, but once you start to see those patterns, you'll be able to find out not only that the person has the pattern, but maybe that person is ahead of you in the pattern, and you'll be able to see what's coming, good or bad, what's going to happen to you next, because they're ahead of you in what's going to happen with that pattern. It comes back to Moneyball a little bit, where they spotted a pattern in what it takes to win baseball games that eluded them for 100 years, but it took them 25 years to do anything about it. The good news about all of this is when we collect all of this information about you, the 150,000 pennies, you're going to be able to see the patterns about your pennies, and you won't have to wait 25 years to do anything about it. Thank you very much.